Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for what would be a Saturday upgraded commander build video happening on a Monday today. But we're going to crack right on and talking about the armor scheme, the playstyle, the upgrades, commander build, so on and so forth. So, what type of cruiser is the Saint-Louis, the Tier 9 French heavy cruiser? And she is definitely a mid to long range cruiser. Her armor scheme really invites punishment, to say the least, as she's just not set up for brawling in any regard. Where with her 2 and 3mm guns, they're really ideal for being able to kite. Granted, you do have a bit of a long reload time for having 9 2 and 3mm guns at 9.7 second reload, and that's with the main battery mod 3 in the 6th slot on the upgrades. A decent shell velocity. So really she's mid-range and long-range. Mid-range being like the 12 kilometers, as you can get her just underneath 12 kilometers max conceal, and beyond, as her guns reach out to 18.3 kilometers. So talking more about that armor scheme, let's get into it. She's got 25mm fore-end plating and aft-end plating, so you can be overmatched on the nose by larger calibers, especially the battleships, and a lot where you're going to see, other Tier 9 battleships, Tier 10 battleships, and super battleships. So if you are not kiting or trying to be as maneuverable as possible, you're likely to take large chunk damage. You have an armor belt of 27mm, which is also in the midsection of the ship, so not completely HE resilient. I mean, even by destroyer standards, you have a kind of a long stretched out superstructure to an extent, but it's not massive, but it's notable, right? And then that drops down into a 100mm torpedo protection armor belt that goes across the whole scheme here. And then you get some thicker armor here on the underneath side of the ship. The bottom Citadel armor 40mm, so perhaps deep water torpedoes might hurt a little bit more there. But once we take things away and you find out where the Citadel is, it's kind of interesting because it's very much boxy when you're looking at how it spans outwards beneath the main battery turrets, and then of course goes in the midsection of the ship. So you can actually be quite cheeky and going if you aim particularly beneath the forward main battery turrets, where it just sticks out there right on the surface, right? Because then I add some things back in. There's a little bit more armor you have to work through in the midsection, but it's still completely possible to, of course, punch through that Citadel-wise. But it is definitely above waterline. So when you go broadside, you preferably would like to do it when you are dark, or you are waiting for that battleship to, have that salvo on you, and then while he's reloading, go ahead and turn out. So we're going to go ahead and look at the modules, and then we'll talk about the upgrades. And one of the things I do have with Saint-Louis, as I've already upgraded and researching the Henri, the Tier 10, is that this is a Lighthouse build. I'll talk about the normal build as well, with the upgrades, and particularly looking at the commander. But starting off here, since we have the main battery mod 3, reducing our reload time in the 6th slot, our reload time is 9.7 seconds. You have a turret traverse time of 22.3 seconds. Our HE shell damage is 2800. Our AP shell damage is 4900. So definitely take advantage of shooting broadside cruisers, battleships, even aircraft carriers for sure with these guns. And we'll talk more about the armament shortly. In terms of the upgrade with the hull, I do recommend going for the hull upgrade first before going for the gunfire control system. You can see it's not a massive jump forward in terms of hit points to go from 38,800 to 40,900, but you can see there's a decent AA buff there that's going to put us up to 78, and then a little bit more on the artillery and a little bit more maneuverability, so it's not a mind-blowing hull upgrade outside of the AA defense that gets a decent buff there with the hull B. Torpedoes, you have 2 racks of torpedoes on either side here on this Saint-Louis. They have a 7.2 second 180 degree turn time, a reload time of 90 seconds. Then take account something like a adrenaline rush, then maybe get it down to 85 as an example. Torpedo range is 9 kilometers. You do have really good torpedo angles and launching torpedoes, especially when you're kiting. Maximum damage 14,833. They're okay-ish speed, like maybe almost average, but they're 60 knots. Detectability range 1.3. And then with the gunfire control system, your stock range is 16.7, but once you've upgraded, you will be reaching out 18.3, which is a little bit more comfortable, especially if you're going for more of a Lighthouse build, or you're moving away from your flank that has collapsed and enemy teams pushing in on you. That's really where the San Luis shines most in kiting. In terms of propulsion, your max speed is 33 knots. We throw the Serum Mike flag, giving us plus 5%. It's going to bump us up to 34.7. And then with the French ships, you typically get that plus 20% maximum speed. So the maximum speed of the engine boost, it does actually vary from ship to ship, or should I say nation to nation, where you see I think like 8%, 15%, 20%, and even 25%, which I think like Ragnar gets as an example, and Palio Emilio. I think it's 25% for those. So you are booking, you are going fast, you're breaking 40 knots here at the San Luis. So that makes her really great for kiting and really opening up the distance when she needs to, especially whether it's you're pushing, getting in position on the enemy team, or you're having to kite away from a flank that has collapsed. For the first slot, I would recommend the main armaments mod 1. This reduces the risk of your main battery and torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by -20%. Your main battery survivability and torpedo tube survivability plus 50%. And your main battery repair time and torpedo tube repair time is reduced by -20% there. So this is just good all around to have in enabling your armament to keep doing what it does best, particularly with the main battery. Wouldn't really recommend the auxiliary armaments mod 1. It's not a secondary ship, it's not an AA ship. You don't need to take magazine mod 1, which reduces the risk of your ship's magazine detonating by -70%. Because if you're playing something like randoms, ranked clan battles, just take the Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. Beyond that, for the second slot, there's two options here. If you're just only looking to spend credits, then I would recommend the engine room protection. This reduces the risk of your engine and your steering gears becoming incapacitated by -20%. Your engine and steering gear repair time is also reduced by -20%. If you have some coal and you're willing to spend some, then I would recommend the engine boost mod 1. This is going to increase the action time of your engine boost by plus 30%. So here you can see your action time is 180 seconds. So I'm just going to do the math via my phone real quick. It pitches you up to 234 seconds, so almost 4 minutes of engine boost duration. So really phenomenal. If you don't have the coupon, they have a 25% coupon. It will reduce the amount it costs via coal. If you pay full price, it's 17,000 coal. Reduced price, I always question myself on this constantly. I'm afraid I'm going to end up telling you guys wrong, so I'll just double check. Yeah, it's 12,750 coal. And there you see the coupon. So really great to have. I thought I would have spent it already, but apparently not. So good to have here, as this refreshes once a month. So I do recommend running that here on the San Luis, and definitely looking to see what that would look like on the Henri. And then for the third slot, there's a couple options here we could talk about, two particularly. The first you see is I have the main battery mod 2, which improves our main battery traverse speed plus 15%. And I think we also have grease the gears on our commander. So then you have that 22.3 second 180 degree turn time, which is getting lower beneath, like a battleship. So you typically see 25, 30, 35 and up. So I opted to just test out the main battery mod 2. Normally what I tend to go for, which is what you see is recommended here by Wargaming, is the aiming systems mod 1. I'll put it on the lower right side of the screen here. Well, it reduces your maximum horizontal and maximum vertical dispersion on your ship by -7% with these main battery guns. Gives you a little bit of a torpedo tube traverse speed buff, and then also a secondary battery firing range buff there as well, and also the shell dispersion. But you mainly take this for your guns being a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to be testing out both of these. It's really up to you, but it is nicer to have that 22.3 second turret traverse time. but I also like having more of the accuracy when I'm having to kite out, you know, tier 10 and super battleships, you know, and being more like 16, 17, and sometimes even those 18 kilometers yesterday, or yes, 18 kilometers like you saw in the video on the technically speaking Friday highlight, as you're just more confident that your guns are likely to land. So those are the two options really to go for there. The fourth slot, I've gone for the propulsion mod 1. Time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating, negative 50%. This is really important in a Lighthouse build. And even if I go for a standard build, if I wasn't going for a Lighthouse build, and I went for a concealment build, then I would actually be taking the, still be taking the prop mod with the 20% engine boost. You know, it's just phenomenal and how the ship is responsive, and you're juking salvos, you're accelerating, you're deaccelerating. So it's just really helpful to have this on. So I definitely recommend it, regardless of whether you go for a concealed build or a non-concealed build, which is what the Lighthouse build means. So if you're new to World of Warships, Lighthouse build means you've just kind of, you've forsaken concealment. You're doing an anti-conceal build to get other perks out of the ship, which typically means rather than going for the concealment system mod 1 on your upgrade in the 5th slot, you go for the steering gears mod 2. This reduces your rudder shift time by negative 40% and your steering gears repair time negative 80% if they should be knocked out. So when you look at the rudder shift time, 6.1 seconds for a tier 9 heavy cruiser here in World of Warships. That is really, really good. And she is very responsive. And so it helps avoiding some salvos. Again, I'll reference the video where I featured this on Louis. We actually didn't take much damage just because of how responsive our rudder shift time was in using our engine boost. As we perfectly kind of aligned ourselves between some Bourgogne and Montana salvos. So that worked out really phenomenal for us. We took very little damage that game and did over 100,000 damage all said and done. If you want to go for the safe build, so to speak, most players probably would rather go for a standard build on San Luis. You very much can, and you can take Concealment System Mod 1. So that would reduce us by 10% here on our detectability range by sea. So basically that would bring you down to 13.05 kilometers. So that's good. It gets you especially more comfortable. You get caught in a sticky situation. So you can definitely do that. So that's what I would swap out here in terms of the upgrades. And then on the 6th slot, I would still go for the main battery mod 3 regardless of if I was doing Lighthouse build or a standard concealed build. With your cruisers, you tend to want to focus, I mean, most ships in the game, generally speaking. There's some ships vary on this, but generally speaking, with your cruisers, you do really want to build into your damage per minute and reducing that reload time. So you can see the main battery reload time is reduced by negative 12%. Otherwise, I think we're like, we would be about 11 seconds, I believe it is, without having this. But you do take a small hit on the nerf of your main battery traverse speed, negative 13%, but we've kind of helped to offset this by taking the main battery mod 2, so that's kind of part of my thinking here, plus 15%, so we've completely nullified that, and then we get additional 2% on top, so to speak. So that's really what's best here, and it's what you can see the recommendation is as well. I find it a little bit more difficult if you were to try to build more into the range, because I mean the shell velocity is 876 meters a second there on the high explosive, 845 on the AP, but realistically if you're kiting and you're shooting a long distance, you're going to be firing your high explosive shells. It's a little more tricky in terms of the dispersion when you start really going out past 17 kilometers and up. So I don't really recommend going for a range build on San Luis. You can. That is something you can definitely try out if you so desire to, but I have just preferred going for the reload time. In terms of your armament, the high explosive shells, you have a 15% chance of causing fires on target. Now we can bump that up with a little bit more with the combat signals, and then if we took Demolition Expert, you can see 15, 16, 17%, then with Demolition Expert on a commander, it'd be 18%. So I do take those two combat signals to increase that fire chance, because you're trying to set fires. Let's say a battleship DCPs your 1 fire or 2 fires. You let their DCP, their damage control party, cool down, and then you pop this bad boy here, your main battery load booster, and you try to get that permanent fire, double fire, triple fire, maybe even a quadruple fire on that enemy battleship. These high explosive shells do 2,800 damage maximum. You penetrate 34 millimeter, which is pretty good because you tend to see like 32 millimeters at the higher tiers, right across battleships in particularly. So that's nice. Armor piercing shouldn't be underestimated. I didn't really get the opportunity to feature it so well in the video from the other day, but it's something you definitely want to utilize when you get broadside, especially on cruisers, because these are 203s. They will put a world of hurt on an enemy cruiser and battleships too if you catch them out correctly. So yeah, don't sleep on the armor piercing with the San Luis, and respect it if you're an enemy ship facing off against a San Luis player who might switch to the armor piercing. Torpedoes, as we talked about and looking at the modules, 90-second reload time, 9-kilometer range, almost 15,000 max damage, 60 knot speed, kind of meh, and then detectability range of 1.3 kilometers. Now, thankfully, you don't have ship-based ASW. You have the depth charge airstrike. So this is very convenient to have. You get 2 available flights, 30-second reload time, 1 attacking aircraft per flight, 2,000 HP hit points on your aircraft, maximum range, again, 7 kilometers. Bombs and payload 2, maximum bomb damage 4,200. So you can get 4 bombs between 2 planes. So they're very nice to have, but you don't have a lot of range. Most of the cruisers don't have a very long range on the depth charge airstrike. But it's better than ship-based, especially when you have different submarines that can shotgun you, fire torpedoes off on you close range, and just completely catch you off guard if you're trying to rush and depth charge them. With your consumables, you have the damage control party. Standard for the higher tier cruisers, 5-second action time, cooldown time, 60 seconds. You have an unlimited number of charges. You get some options here between talking about hydroacoustic search or the defensive AA fire. This isn't an AA cruiser. If I really wanted to take out a tier 9 AA focused cruiser, then I would go for something more like Neptune. Seattle would be another option. As it's not the best thing about this ship. You have a decent AA defense, a 78. But you're facing, you can see tier 8s, which CVs you can do okay against, but tier 10 CVs and super CVs you will struggle with regardless. And the hydroacoustic search is just better overall because there's so many torpedoes in World of Warships versus when I started playing, first started playing back in 2019. The hydro does detect torpedoes 3.5 kilometers out. Detection of ships 5 kilometers. You can spot subs, their max depth of 2 kilometers. Then you have a 100-second action time and a cooldown time of 120 seconds. We can lengthen the hydro if we take the Sierra Bravo. So you can see here plus 10% on our hydroacoustic search consumable action time. And that's going to bump us up to 110 seconds. So I do also like running that. Then you have your repair party, HP per second 204. We can bump that up with India Delta. Again, I would use this in like ranked randoms, clan battles. And we're going to go up to 245 HP per second. Action time is 28 seconds. Cooldown time is 80 seconds. And you get 4 of these consumables. I think we have, yeah, we already have Superintendent here. And then for here, you have several options. Now, honestly, the engine boost is the best out of this. Fighter is pretty worthless. Spotting aircraft, we could talk a little bit about that. But really, it's the engine boost, the plus 20%. You know, as I said earlier, other ships, nations can get 8%, 15%, 20% among the best. Outside, I think like it's called the emergency engine boost, which is 25%. But 20% is really great when you can get your cruiser over 40 knots, which you can do with San Luis. So it's really the best one overall to run here. It has action time of 180 seconds. We talked about with slot 2, with the engine boost mod 1, the special upgrade, we can bump it up to 234 seconds. Cooldown time, 90 seconds, and we have 4 of them with Superintendent. So I tend to just use one right at the start of a game to get to my positioning earlier in the match. Spotting aircraft, yeah, if you're going for the Lighthouse build, kiting build, right, then do I really have a use for hydroacoustic search, right? You can kind of throw that question out. Certainly, that is a valid perspective, but it's still very difficult if you're a Lighthouse build and you have no idea if there's a destroyer or a submarine stalking you, then it's like, how do I really figure out what direction he may be coming from if I don't run radio position frequency? Talk about that on the commander. So the hydroacoustic search, sorry, I don't know why I'm talking about that. You can still have hydro and you can still have spotting aircraft. Long day apparently. So those two work really well in tandem. I think what I was trying to say here is that with the engine boost, this works out excellent in helping avoid incoming salvos and enemy fire from battleships, cruisers, destroyers, even CVs trying to drop you. So apologies, you can have both hydro and spotting aircraft, which is very convenient, but I kind of argue that the engine boost is the best of all three of these options here. Then with the main battery reload booster, your main battery reload time is reduced by negative 50%. So then that 9.7 becomes like 4.8 and 4.9, 4.85, something like that, which is really great. As I talked about with the high explosive shells when we talked about the armament, if you're trying to set permafires on a battleship cruiser that's just put out some fires, or maybe he's put out a flood from an enemy CV dropping torpedoes on him, or a sub, whatever the case, then you can really start ticking up your fire damage if you utilize the main battery reload booster well. Maybe you catch a destroyer or submarine out and you want to get the reload booster off on them. Maybe you get a broadside cruiser and you fire your HE salvo and he's broadside, and you could switch to your armor piercing. You can get your armor piercing up that much faster to punish that enemy player while they're broadside to you. This has an action time of 15 seconds, cooldown time of 80 seconds, and we get 5 of them when we take Superintendent. So another great reason of taking Superintendent here. But with all these, you can take the November Foxtrot combat signal, as this reduces the consumable cooldown time. So you can see 80 to 76. Or was this was that 90? Yeah, 90 to 85.5, 80 to 76, and then 120 to 114 seconds, and then here 60 to 57. So this is pretty standard what I like to run here when playing San Luis. Going into our commander, you're going to see me talk about the Lighthouse build first with kind of the setup we're going for here. And then I'll talk about what would it look like if you're just going for a normal, typical cruiser build where you're building fully into the concealment. But first, let's talk about the Lighthouse build. So we have our Azure Lane Dunkirk commander on here. It's nice change of pace versus just the standard voices. So it's more, I get more of amusement out of the high-pitched screaming, if you will. Starting us off, there's a few options. Either you could go for Grease the Gears first, which improves your main battery traverse speed by plus 15%, or Last Stand. Ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine and steering gears incapacitated. Now, I would probably argue for your first 1 point, you have a 10-point or higher commander. Maybe you're putting on here first, maybe just a 6-pointer. But really, the Last Stand is going to be the best one to go for. When we were talking about the armor scheme, I'm just going to briefly point this out again. You're pretty vulnerable back here. I've had my steering gears and engine knocked out multiple times just because you're not really strongly armored back here on your stern. So I really think that taking the Last Stand skill first is the best one to take. Then after that, for Lighthouse build purposes, I do prefer the priority target. I find the value in that, especially if there's a destroyer who's hunting me and he's flashing me. And what I mean by flashing is if you see one just targeted, one targeted, so that means he's switching between his main battery turrets and his torpedoes. So then I'm like, okay, I probably should change my direction or course of speed if I don't have my hydroacoustic search available. This also helps with those stinking high-tier battleship players who like to cross-map shoot you. It happens. It definitely happens. So even if I see, okay, none of the battleships or cruisers perhaps on my flank are aiming at me, they're shooting these other guys, then I might draw my attention that there's another enemy player trying to cross-map shoot me, or he's flanked me somehow and I didn't know he was there. So then puts my guard up, so then I can utilize my better maneuverability with the rudder shift time to respond accordingly, or use that engine boost if it's not already going. Then for a 6-point build, I would go ahead and go for the Adrenaline Rush. As you lose some health, you know, having your reload time down from 9.6, 9.5, 9.4, 9.3, beneficial. Slight buff on your reload time, your torpedoes, airstrike armament reload time, secondary battery, but we don't really talk about secondary battery so much with San Luis. And then you get a slight buff to your continuous AA damage. And then for a 10-point build, I would go ahead and go for that top grade gunner. Now the reason you take this is not for the permanent effect of your secondary battery reload time being negative 10%. It's for whenever an enemy ship is detected within your ship's standard detectability range, which right now is 14.5, then you automatically get a negative 8% in your main battery reload time. So then you will instantly, you will see that 9.7, as I'm going to do math again here, so let's hope Flimsy doesn't hurt his brain. That was harsh. That was a harsh joke, Flimsy. Then you're going to see your reload drop down to 8.9 seconds. And then take it into account Adrenaline Rush, so getting down to 8.5. So usually with Lighthouse builds, what the goal is, you're sacrificing your concealment in order to increase your DPM. That tends to be the logic of going for a Lighthouse build, and also that it's a cruiser that's agile or capable enough of doing that. So that's a 10-point build. Then I might look at a 13-point build going then for Superintendent. So then I'm getting 4 hydros, 4 engine boost, 4 repair parties, and 5 the main battery reload boosters. And I burned through all 5 of them before. Then for a 14-point build, I'm going to jump back to the beginning, take main battery traverse speed. Really good to have. And then you see right now we have Dunkirk as a 16-point build commander. So then where would we be placing other remaining points here? Well, one is I'm going to look at taking Survivability Expert. Because I'm making myself my presence more known, then I'd like to be able to help San Luis out, and going from 40,900 to 44,950 hit points. So we can play the Lighthouse build game a little bit better. And then the other fun thing you can talk about here is the heavy HE and SAP shells. Basically what happens here is if your ship's detectability range with a main battery caliber of 149 millimeters and above, which we have 2 and 3 millimeter guns here on the San Luis, then you're going to go plus 15% on your detectability. So you know how we were 14.5? Yeah, we're 16.7 now. But how this skill works out well is now we've extended the range of our top grade gunner skill to work. So now instead of activating at 14.5 kilometers away, it's activating at 16.7 kilometers away. Yes, it's a little bit of a madman build. That's part of the point here with having a Lighthouse build on the San Luis. Now it leaves you just 1 point left. So then what are you going to be taking? Do you want faster torpedoes? Do you want a consumable preparation reload time reduction? Do you want gun feeder to switch out between your high explosive shells and armor piercing by down to 5.8 versus a full 9.7? Do you want incoming fire alert, right? So this is where you can kind of change things up, if you will. Now, honestly, probably in my opinion, I might lean towards the consumable specialist just so I get my engine boost, my hydroacoustic search, and my main battery reload time off cooldown a little bit faster. And that this skill works great with the November Foxtrot, which is already reducing negative 5%. So we stack that negative 5% on top of the negative 7.5%. And then we're getting negative 12.5%. So those two work together in tandem really nice. So this could be your 21-point build. The other thing that I would discuss is giving up priority target, take incoming fire alert, and swap out priority target for demolition expert. So then your fire chance is bumped up to 18%. As you see, it's 17% now. So just swap out those two skills, and any enemy ship that fires at you from a distance greater than 4.5 kilometers, you'll see this kind of warning, incoming fire, pop up on the mid right of your screen. So that would be the swap out there. Otherwise, anything else that I might run here with a Lighthouse build, Probably not so much. We're not really building an AA. It's kind of point. I don't know how great it's really to take radio location skill. I mean, you're detectable from the moon already with this build. Is it that important you know where that closest enemy ship is to you? Maybe, because you've got that 20% engine boost and you can run down a destroyer that's shadowing you, as an example. Now, I'm actually going to send, well, I was going to send, do I even have enough doubloons? Because I'm like really low on doubloons. Okay, I do. Oh, I'm taking a hit for the team on this one. Okay, so we're going to send Dunkirk to the reserve for just a moment. Okay, now I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to throw on just another commander here. And really quick, talk about a standard cruiser build here with the Dunkirk. And doing it super fast, this is probably what I would look at. So you can actually see there's not too much of a difference here. Outside of the fact that we basically, it's just not having concealment, right? Versus the Lighthouse build if you were to go this way, or you were to go perhaps nope, that way, right? That's the other alternative with that. Otherwise, you know, I would feel pretty comfortable taking this build. So then now our concealment is 13 kilometers, but again, remember, we would, as I completely knock over my microphone, we would take concealment here in the 5th slot. So then 13 times 0.9, then your 11.7 concealment, all said and done with this type of build. Right here, like that. So 13 down to 11.7. And San Luis plays best 12 kilometers and back. Like I define mid-range in World Warships at the higher tier as being 12 kilometers. So you're able to play with your concealment when you're at 11.7. You can go dark, so on and so forth, relatively quite well. So this would be my alternative build. Otherwise, you know, the Lighthouse build is what I've kind of liked to change things up here on the San Luis, and just being able to have a little bit of fun and do something different with this type of cruiser line versus doing the same thing on every high tier cruiser, so to speak. So with that being said, I hope you liked today's video in going over the Tier 9 French heavy cruiser, the San Luis. If you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to my Patreon supporters. Until next time, take care.